Okay, make sure sound is working as usual. Whenever it decides to actually load for me. Hey, there it is. Do we have sound? Wonderful, we have sound. Set this to this, and we can begin. So today, I'll clean my paintbrush real quick. Got a little dusty. Today we are going to paint a Flamer of Tzeentch, and there's some steps that may require some drying time on this. So in the intervening moments while this thing is drying, we're also going to paint a pink horror. I know I painted a pink horror on the last stream, so this will just be the waiting for this model to dry model. So we're going to start off by doing a blend of two colors on this Flamer. We're going to use Aethermatic Blue and Magos Purple. In this case, we don't need to open them both. We just need to do one at a time. Sometimes with blends with contrast paint, I like to open them all and then use them in quick succession, but this one is not as important, so. But we're starting off with Aethermatic Blue. This is going to be the main base of the model. So I'm just going to go in here, get it about like this or so. That looks about right. And then I'm not washing my brush off, and I'm going to take some Magos Purple, and I'm just going to blend it in down here at the bottom so that out to where these flames are is more of a purple. So we'll get this nice purple to blue, blue to purple, whatever transition. This, again, as always, is just tabletop standard, nothing major, so we're not super concerned about the blend. But so then we're going to come up here and go back in with our blue and go down all the limbs and stuff. Basically the end of where the skin ends anywhere, so down at the end of the body or at the up near the heads or at the end of the arms is going to be purple. So again, without rinsing my brush off, I'm going to take the purple and just blend it down into the blue. Forgot some blue in here, so I'll just grab some more of that and then back to the purple. That's what's great about contrast wet blending, because the colors are pretty weak on their own, and so you can just go back to one, fix your blend, return to the other, and it won't pollute your colors too bad. If you really wanted to be careful, you could use two brushes, or you could rinse your brush thoroughly between each color, but I'm not super concerned about it. I'm even less concerned than normal because I'm pretty sure I'm going to run out of these two colors painting this army. So I'll have to buy new pots anyway. But we just want to make sure that we get a nice blend all the way around here. And you want, when you're blending, typically you want your blends to start and finish not on lines that are already on the miniature. So I'll show you what that means. So if we look at, well, this one's better actually. If we look at this guy's arm, just clean that up a little bit while we're talking. If we look at this guy's arm, there's a natural line right here where his, I guess where his wrist is. His hand starts and his arm ends. We don't want our blend to be right there, because then it just looks like his hand is purple and his arm is blue. So I carried the purple forward a little bit, and then our blend starts here, and so it looks more like a transition of color rather than just his hand is a different color. Same thing here. Just adding a bit more purple here. There's a kind of natural line right here where his heads sort of begin and his body ends. We want the transition to be not on that line, so either on this side or this side of that line. Down here, it's not as much of a problem. There's no real natural line anywhere that we would run into. But you just want to keep that in mind whenever you're blending. Don't blend on a line that already exists. Create a new line where your transition is. So, as I said, this guy's going to have to dry for a minute or two. I'm just going to stick him here next to my fan. And while we wait for him to dry, I'm just going to work on a pink horror a little bit. And I'm going to work on a pink horror in a different way than I did on the last stream. In case you watch that and you're like, I don't want to see another pink horror. So we're going to paint him differently. We're going to start with pink horror. I know it's a shocking color choice. But we're going to start with that. So before, we painted a pink horror by painting him all in Volupus purple, or Volupus pink rather, which is the pink contrast paint. And then we sponged on this pink horror, and then Pixie Pink, is that what it's called? Yeah, Pixie Pink from the Army Painter. We're going to do it, we're going to use those same three colors, but we're going to do it in a different way this time. So obviously we're starting with pink horror this time. And depending on how I haven't tried this method yet, it's just something I thought I would want to try. But depending on how this works, I'll probably do some number in the army in this paint style and the rest in the other paint style, just because they're demons. They don't all have to look identical. They've been mutating and stewing in the warp for who knows how long, so they could be all sorts of weird and different colored and all sorts of stuff. I am trying to avoid the feathers where at all possible. We are going to use contrast paint on those feathers if we get to that. And it does cover over the pink pretty well, but still. So I know this is truly riveting content, watching me base coat a miniature. But as soon as that flamer dries a little bit more, we're going to go into a little combination of colors that I've discovered that works really well to make fire, which is different than my normal fire, which is I typically blend yellow, orange, and red contrast paint, which I think comes out great as fire. But I'm going to do it a different way on these guys. I originally contemplated doing all the fire in the army the same way. Then I decided that the brimstone horrors for this army needed to stand out because they aren't just fire, they're brimstone horrors. They're something unique. So they have my typical red, orange, yellow blend on them. And all the other fire in the army, it's just fire, it's not a brimstone horror or anything, we'll have this new method that I'm trying. Alright, so there's the pink put on our pink horror. Let's look at our flamer real quick. Still kind of wet. I'm just going to take this, and there's some spots where on the flame, which is what we're going to paint next, that have some extra contrast paint on them, and we don't care about that because we're going to paint them. So I'm just going to pull that off. Normally, if you pull contrast paint off like this, you'll get really gnarly tide marks, and you don't want that. But since we're going to cover these flames with another color, they can be as ugly as it doesn't matter. Alright, so we'll let that dry for just like 2 more minutes, and then we'll go back to our flamer. But now we're going to go on to our second color here, which is the Volupus Pink, which we put on first last time. And so I'm going to do a thing that I've done before. So I'm just going to dip my brush in the paint, as you might imagine normally you do. And then I'm going to dip it in the paint water, Give it a little swish, not much. And then just come in and apply it all over. Same thing. And our pink's a little wet still, our pink horror, but that's okay. If it mixes a little bit, no big deal. And you could be more exacting with this mixture. You could use like actual contrast medium or something. But yeah, I think most people know how to like mix paint in the same way that everyone else on YouTube and everywhere says, hey, this is how you mix paint. I try to do things different and hopefully in a faster way that still works out. I didn't paint this tentacle head thing. I'll fix that in a minute. And so this is just if you're in a hurry and you just need to get pink horrors done because you need to run 1,000 of them now. This just mix with the paint water will get you going. Just get a little more in there. And up here as well. Alright, so there's that. And then the next step would be we'd go back to the sponge and we'd sponge on this lighter, the pixie pink. But our flamer is dry enough now that we can continue with the main course of this stream. So, our flamer's back. He's still wet in a couple places, but not the places we're going to paint, so that's fine with us. We're going to take this Fire Dragon Bright. Make sure it's shaken up appropriately. Listen to the lawnmower outside. Hopefully it's not too loud. And we're going to paint all the flame on this guy in this color. Now it doesn't cover as well as you might expect or might hope for. But that's okay because of the steps we're going to do after. We do not need perfect coverage on this. And that's another thing that I try to always look for is paint techniques that can be done with a single application of a color. Some paints can be applied in a single coat and work just great for almost anything. A lot of paints cannot, though. A lot of paints you will require a second coat for many techniques. So I hate going back and doing the same thing twice, so I will strive to find techniques that don't require absolute perfect coverage to get a result still. And that's what this is today. So just getting... There's a lot of fire on these guys. And some of these guys have 4 arms instead of 2, so they have even more fire. But you just gotta methodically go through the miniature and make sure you hit all the spots. And if you see the blue or the purple through the fire, it's not a big deal. Like I said, for this technique, we don't need perfect coverage. I am still trying to get solid coverage, but if there's some poking through, it doesn't matter. The difference between purposely avoiding full coverage and just not needing full coverage. Because there are techniques where you purposely avoid full coverage, like dry brushing would be the prime example of that. That's not what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm obviously not dry brushing, but I'm also not avoiding a full coat of paint. I'm just not requiring it. Alright, then on their head, it can sometimes get tricky to figure out what exactly is fire. They've got all sorts of weird, like, they've got little baby heads fading in and out all over the place, so can be confusing. And some of their little heads with teeth in them look like flame, and like those are teeth on the baby heads. Get that and that. I think that's it on the heads. But if you miss some, you can go back and fix it, but also it's a horror. Or it's not a horror, it's a demon. Demons spawn some sort of horrible monster, so If something looks a little wonky, it's not the end of the world. The only other thing to be careful on these guys is their hands. They have these like curved sections of their hands. You just want to make sure you paint the flame and not those curved sections. There's some more flame down here. There we go. Alright. So we'll let that dry for a little bit. And we'll go back to our pink horror, I think. Let's see if that's ready for the next step. We'll put this guy over here. Dry. Pink horror, not ready for the next step. So we'll leave that alone. And we'll do a different step on our flamer. So we're going to use Rakarth flesh now. And I'm going to do the teeth in this color. The teeth, because they're... if you think of every miniature as a combination of peaks and valleys, your high points are your peaks, your low points are your valleys. Teeth are almost always peaks, so they dry quickly, especially with contrast paint. So I'm just going to go in and paint all the teeth in this color. There's some orange kind of nearby, but we'll be careful and try not to make any mistakes. So then we have all these little guys here. So just going to try to pick out where their teeth are. Sometimes they're a little hard to tell. All these tiny little heads floating around, but just do your best. And if it looks like kind of an amalgamation of color at the end, well, whatever. It's just a demon. Okay, and then there's... Yeah, and when you're painting teeth, don't forget that there's a giant mouth on this end of the creature. And it has teeth as well. Get the back side of those teeth. And it's an opportunity that I haven't taken with my paint job here, but one that you can take if you want to add a little bit more detail is on a lot of these teeth. You can see right here there are gums on those teeth. You could paint those in a different color if you wanted some extra detail. On just pure tabletop standard, I don't think that's required, but it is an option. So now we're going to go to Leviathan Blue, and this is going to be for the eyes of this creature. So we just look around. There are going to be a bunch of them. And we're just putting in little dots of this color wherever it needs to be. And if you get more paint in an area than, you know, if your dollop of paint is bigger than your eye, then that's an opportunity to come back, excuse me, come back with a different color like we're going to in a second and dot in some pupils. And then it just looks like you have this sort of eye pit with a glowing pupil in the middle. You'll see what I mean when I do it. I think that's all the eyes. But now our flame should be dry enough that we can go on to our next flame step. So we did Fire Dragon Bright. Now we're going on to Dorn Yellow. Dorn Yellow is not a requirement. You can use any pale yellow. I just used Dorn Yellow because I happen to have it. My pot is actually going bad. It's so old at this point. Doesn't matter though. You just need a little bit on your brush. And you're going to find all your edges on your flame here. And just do this. And you want a pale yellow that is too pale, effectively. This yellow is effectively almost white against this orange, and in a normal circumstance that would look weird, but with the steps we're going to take afterward, it will look just fine. Just make sure when you're doing this that you get both sides of every flame. Don't like do this right here and then, oh, I've done that, and move on to the next. You still have the reverse to do. And if any of them are dimensional on top, so not just a vertical line, make sure to highlight the tops as well. So we'll just do this all over, and it can be pretty messy. You just want to make sure not to cover all of the orange. You want to leave that orange showing, but also get a good amount of highlights in here. And again, you don't need Dorn Yellow specifically. I don't think they make it anymore. They might make it, but it's no longer an edge paint. It might just be a layer paint. I don't remember. But in any event, any pale yellow will do. And honestly, you could probably even do it in white. Your highlights would be a little more extreme. But because of the next step we're going to do, I don't think it would matter. Alright, I think... Oh, elbow flame here. And elbow flame here. Alright, I think that's all of the flame highlighted. So we'll give that a couple seconds to dry, and I'm going to go and do the pupils I was talking about. So I'm going to grab a lighter blue, in this case Bhaharoth blue. Bhaharoth blue actually is one of the paints that I was just talking about. Dorn Yellow. Let's see, do I have my other one? I might not have the other one. Bhaharoth blue used to be a edge paint, and they changed it to be a layer paint. I think they did that with all the edge paints, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of this and just find these blue dots that I did earlier and put these inside of them. And I'm not going to do these for all of them because some of these eyes are completely tiny and you'll hardly see them anyway. But for some of these, especially if I overdid the dark blue, I'll put these into the little spots in there. There we go. So now we have some more eye definition up there. Alright, so now our flame has dried a little bit. We're going to take Cassandora Yellow, which is a shade. Specifically not a contrast. This is not E-end in yellow. If you use E-end in yellow, you need to water it down or thin it down using contrast medium. It is too saturated and will ruin the effect. So we're going to take Cassandora Yellow and just go over these flames. As you can see, it makes the brighter highlight pop, but also come down into a yellow more than a stark white like it was before. And you could be asking yourself, why not just highlight it in yellow? Personally, I think that putting an overall wash like this that's going to tint the whole thing makes the whole effect look better, because the shade is shading all parts of it equally, instead of just having these bright yellow highlights. It's personal opinion, so if you think that it doesn't look as good this way, then don't do it, but that's just how I like to do it. Get this, and if you get a little bit of this on the skin, it's not a big deal. Just the fire would probably be giving off some light. I'm not going to go out of my way to do OSL on this guy, but if some accidentally happens, great. And speaking of OSL, which if you're not aware, OSL stands for Object Source Lighting, and it means typically when you're painting or just looking at a miniature, even if you didn't purposely put a light source on the miniature, you know, the light typically on the ceiling, so your light source is on the ceiling pointing down at your miniature. Object source lighting means the object, in this case the miniature, is creating its own light. Now obviously it isn't unless we actually put electronics in it, but a style of painting is when you paint the style of painting object source lighting, you paint a glow around lights, or you paint a spotlight or whatever. So if you weren't aware what OSL was, that's what it is. We're not doing it on this one, but if it accidentally happens, great. So then the last thing we're going to do is take some Nuln Oil and all those teeth that we painted earlier. Just going to put this in and amongst them. Give them a more sinister feeling with this black color around them. Let's see, I know there's more up here somewhere. Oh, we didn't get that flame. We'll come back and do that in just a second. The other thing you can do if you want is to make your flame look a little more sinister is just at the base of all your flames, just take a little bit of Nuln Oil and just touch it along the bottom, just like this, just to maybe make it appear a little smoky or something, or just darker, kind of weird looking. There, down in there. Alright, did I get the other side? I did, but I'm going to get right here and right here. And then the only other thing you can do, if you want, is you can put some black down here to give some definition to the tentacles. I'm not personally going to. I think I like the tentacles just kind of there, being part of the skin. But that would be a good option if you wanted to add some more definition. Just going to grab the Cassandora yellow back and do this bit of flame that I missed. Good. Alright, and with that, our Flamer is done. Simple paint job, but I've got a bunch of these to paint, so I figure find a simple paint job and go at it, and however long it takes, that's how long it takes. The miniature always looks worse with a primed base still. Try to cover it up a little bit, but not ready to do the bases yet. I will do the base. I will do a base on stream so that you guys can see how I'm going to do the bases, but not doing that yet. I'm going to do that at the end, or maybe closer to the end, maybe not exactly the end. But yeah, so that's a Flamer. I'll finish off this this pink horror later also. The only other step is we're going to take our Pixie Pink and we're going to take a bit of sponge, in this case pluck foam or sponge, whatever, and just stipple it on, give us a nice highlighted pattern, but without giving us the brush strokes of dry brushing and without completely covering the miniature. So yeah, that was how to paint a Flamer. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A really easy method for blending some contrast colors together, and then an easy method for fire. Thank you everybody for watching, whether you watched live or are watching sometime in the future. I appreciate it either way, and I will see you next time.